You wake up determined. Today will be different. You've made the list, set the schedule, visualized success. 3 hours later, you're on the couch, scrolling through your phone's feed. That important task still untouched, and the voice in your head whispering what you already know. You're going to give up again. It's not the first time, it won't be the last. And the cruelest part of all this isn't the failure itself. It's the fact that you know exactly what you need to do. You want to do it, but something inside you simply won't allow it. It's as if there's an invisible saboteur operating behind the scenes of your mind, ensuring you never finish anything that truly matters. And you know what's worse? You've already tried discipline. You've already tried motivation. You've already tried planning. Nothing works for more than a few days. The pattern always returns, and with each cycle, you feel a little weaker, a little more defeated, a little more convinced that maybe you simply don't have what it takes. Here's the truth nobody tells you. You weren't designed to finish what you start. Your mind is a factory running on survival mode, not achievement mode. And that default setting has a very clear purpose: to keep you alive, not to make you thrive. There's a precise neurological reason for every abandoned project, every forgotten goal, every broken promise you've made to yourself. And no, it's not a lack of willpower. It's not a lack of discipline. It's something much deeper and much older than any self-help advice can reach. Henry Ford transformed American industry because he understood a fundamental principle. You can't fix a system without first understanding how it really works. And your mind is a system. A complex, ancient, and terribly efficient system at keeping you exactly where you are. In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 neurological mechanisms that ensure you never finish anything, how the Stoics discovered how to reprogram these mechanisms 2,000 years ago, and the exact protocol Ford would use if he were optimizing minds instead of production lines. Let's start with the first mechanism, the most invisible and the most destructive. Your brain has a reward system that works like an optimization algorithm. It's constantly calculating how much effort is needed versus how much pleasure is guaranteed. And here's the problem. This system was calibrated 200,000 years ago, when humanity's greatest challenge was not to starve or be eaten by a predator. In that context, expending energy without an immediate guarantee of reward was literally fatal. So your brain developed a circuit specialized in making you avoid any action whose result is not immediate and guaranteed. This circuit is called the dopaminergic reward system, and it's active right now as you watch this video. Every time you think about doing something difficult, something that will take weeks or months to yield results, this system triggers a chemical signal that literally reduces your motivation. It's not a metaphor. It's pure chemistry. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation, is only released when your brain detects a nearby and certain reward. Distant goals, however important they may be, simply don't trigger this system. Now think about this. You set a goal. Lose 20 pounds, write a book, build a business. All these goals have something in common. The result is far away. Your brain analyzes the situation and arrives at an inevitable conclusion: high energy expenditure, uncertain reward, long time frame. Verdict: not worth it. And then something fascinating happens. Your phone vibrates. A notification. You look. Someone liked your photo. Boom. Dopamine. Immediate reward. Zero effort. Guaranteed pleasure. Your brain has just learned something. You don't need to do difficult things to feel good. There are shortcuts, and the more you use these shortcuts, the stronger the neural circuit that prefers them becomes. This is what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to prefer the easy over the important. Every time you choose scrolling instead of working, you are strengthening the neural pathway of procrastination and weakening the neural pathway of action. And here's the real problem. You don't realize it's happening. It's invisible, gradual. It's irreversible unless you understand what you're doing and take specific steps to reverse the process. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, wrote something that seems to have been written for this exact moment in history. He said, "The mind becomes what it habitually contemplates." He didn't have functional magnetic resonance imaging. He didn't know what neuroplasticity was. But he understood, almost 2,000 years ago, that there is a natural law governing how your mind is formed. You are not the result of your desires. You are the result of your habits of attention. And if you have the habit of paying attention to what is easy, your brain will optimize for ease. If you have the habit of paying attention to what is important, your brain will optimize for importance. But here's the problem. You can't simply decide to pay attention to difficult things. Your reward system will sabotage that decision. You need to trick the system. You need to hack the algorithm. And that's exactly what the Stoics did. The second mechanism that prevents you from finishing what you start is even more brutal because it operates at the level of identity. There's a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. It works like this. Your brain has a biological need to maintain a consistent image of who you are. When you act contrary to that image, your brain experiences something similar to physical pain. It's uncomfortable, it's stressful, and your brain will do anything to eliminate that discomfort. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you see yourself as someone who doesn't finish things, and this has happened several times, your brain has incorporated that into your identity. You're no longer just someone who gives up. You're a quitter. That's your identity now. And every time you try to act against that identity, your brain activates the alarm system. Because from its perspective, you're not just failing to finish a project, you're threatening the coherence of your own existence. That's why real change is so rare. Not because people don't want to change, but because true change means destroying the person you are and rebuilding from scratch. And your brain interprets that as an existential threat. It prefers consistency to growth. It prefers predictability to progress. And it will sabotage any attempt at change that threatens the story you tell yourself. Henry Ford understood this when he revolutionized industrial production. He realized he couldn't ask workers to change their habits. He had to change the system around them so that the new behavior was easier than the old one. He didn't appeal to willpower. He redesigned the environment. And that's exactly what you need to do with your mind. You can't overcome cognitive dissonance with effort. You need to redesign the system so that the new identity is easier to maintain than the old one. The Stoics had a specific exercise for this. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It wasn't pessimism, it was mental engineering. It works like this. Before starting anything, you visualize all the points where you'll probably want to give up. You don't try to motivate yourself to continue. You accept that the urge to give up will appear. And then you create an automatic response for each of these points. It's like programming software. If X happens, I do Y. If I feel like giving up on day 5, I only do 5 minutes. If I feel like skipping the workout, I only do the warm-up. If I feel like not writing, I only write 1 sentence. You're not trying to be perfect. You're creating a fail-safe system, a system that works even when you don't want it to work. Because here's the truth. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad weeks. Motivation will disappear. And if your plan depends on constant motivation, your plan has already failed. The third mechanism is the cruelest of all because it uses your own intelligence against you. It's what psychologists call planning bias. It works like this. When you imagine the future, your brain automatically underestimates the time, effort, and obstacles needed to achieve any goal. It overestimates your future discipline. It assumes that tomorrow you will be stronger, more focused, more dedicated than you are today. And this creates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that starting is easy because finishing will be easy. But finishing is never easy. And the smarter you are, the worse this bias works. Because intelligent people are better at creating compelling narratives about why this time will be different. They can imagine detailed scenarios of success. They can feel the reward before doing the work. And this feeling of anticipated reward releases dopamine. You literally feel pleasure just from planning. And your brain registers this as if you had already done the work. That's why you feel so good after creating a detailed plan. You leave the planning session energized, motivated, confident. But 3 days later, when it's time to do the real work, all that energy has vanished. Because your brain has already collected the emotional reward. It's already tasted success, and now doing the real work seems redundant. You've already had the emotional experience of achievement without making any real effort. It's the perfect trick. Your brain tricks you into feeling like you've already done what you still need to do. And then, when you fail, you don't understand why. After all, you had a perfect plan. You were motivated. What happened? What happened is that you confused planning with execution. You confused intention with action. You confused imagining success with creating success. Let me pause here for a second and ask a question that perhaps no one has ever asked you. What is the thing you give up on most often? Not what you tell people, but the truth. That project you start every year and abandon every year. That goal you set every Monday and forget every Thursday. I want you to know one thing. What you're feeling is more common than you imagine. Thousands of people watch this video every day carrying the exact same weight you carry. If you have the courage, leave a comment telling me what that thing is for you. It can be something simple like, I never finish what I start, or I always give up when it gets difficult. Your honesty will make someone else feel less alone today. And sometimes, that's exactly what someone needs to hear to take the first step. Now, let me continue showing you how to break this pattern once and for all. Henry Ford had a phrase that should be engraved on the wall of every office, every academy, every school. You can't build a reputation based on what you're going to do. Reputation is built only on what you've already done, and the same logic applies to your mind. You can't build discipline based on what you intend to do tomorrow. Discipline is built only on what you do today. And here's the insight Ford would have had if he were optimizing minds instead of factories. Discipline is not a trait. It's a production system. You are not born disciplined. You manufacture discipline. One action at a time, one day at a time, one decision at a time. And like any production line, the quality of the output depends on the quality of the process. If your process is based on motivation, your output will be inconsistent, because motivation is emotional fuel. And emotions fluctuate. Some days you wake up motivated, some days you wake up exhausted. If your system depends on how you feel, your system will fail half the time. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. They created what we would now call execution protocols. They weren't based on feelings, they were based on principles. The main one is what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. It works like this. There are only two categories of things in the universe: things you control and things you don't control. And the only thing you truly control is your actions at this very moment. You don't control the results. You don't control how long it will take. You don't control whether it will be easy or difficult. You don't control whether other people will recognize or ignore it. You only control whether you will act now or not. And when you understand this, when you truly absorb this, the whole game changes. Because you stop waiting to feel like it. You stop waiting for the right moment. You stop waiting to be ready. You simply act, not because you want to, but because you can. And because you can, you must. Here's the exact protocol the Stoics used, and that Ford would apply if he were optimizing his mind. First, you identify the smallest possible action that moves you in the right direction, not the ideal action, the minimum viable action. If the goal is to write a book, the minimum action is to write a sentence. If the goal is to get in shape, the minimum action is to do a push-up. If the goal is to build a business, the minimum action is to send an email. The action has to be so small that it's impossible to fail. So small that even on your worst day you can do it. Second, you remove all decision-making from that action. You don't decide whether you're going to do it. You've already decided. The decision was made once when you created the system. Now you just execute. Every day, same time, same place, same action. No negotiation, no exceptions, no days off. Because every exception you make is a crack in the system, and cracks expand. Third, you measure only one metric: consistency. Not quality, not quantity, not results. Just whether you did it or not. And you keep a visual record of it. An X on the calendar, a mark on the wall, a number in a notebook, something you can watch grow day after day. Because your brain needs feedback, and if the feedback it receives is that you're maintaining a streak, it will want to maintain the streak. That's what psychologists call the streak effect. The longer the streak, the stronger the compulsion not to break it. Fourth, and this is the most important, you separate identity from outcome. You are not someone who is trying to be disciplined. You are someone who acts. It doesn't matter if you want to. It doesn't matter if you like it. It doesn't matter how you feel. You act because action is your nature now. It's who you are. And when you internalize that, when you truly become that person, something extraordinary happens. Actions that were once difficult become automatic. What once required willpower now happens without thought. Because you are no longer trying to change, you have already changed. The person you were, the one who gave up, the one who procrastinated, the one who had potential but never executed, that person died. And in their place is someone new, someone who acts, someone who finishes, someone who keeps promises, especially the promises they make to themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his personal diary that should be read every morning by anyone who wants to transform their life. He said, "At dawn, when you don't want to get out of bed, have this thought ready. I'm waking up to do the work of a human being. Should I be bored to go and do what I was born to do, the purpose for which I was put in the world? Or was I created to stay under the covers and keep warm? But it is so pleasant. Were you born to feel pleasure? In general, were you born to feel or to act? Look at the plants, the birds, the ants, the spiders, the bees, all doing their part, helping to organize the world. And you don't want to do the work of a human being? You don't rush to do what your nature demands? This was written almost 2,000 years ago by a man who ruled the largest empire on earth, a man who had every excuse in the world not to be disciplined, who had all the power, all the comfort, all the justification to live in indulgence. And yet, every day, he chose action over comfort, discipline over pleasure, duty over ease, not because he was special, but because he understood a simple truth. You become what you practice. And here's the part most people don't understand. You're already practicing something, right now, every day. The question isn't whether you'll practice. The question is what you'll practice. If you practice procrastination, you're becoming a master at procrastinating. If you practice distraction, you're becoming an expert at distracting yourself. If you practice giving up, you're refining the art of giving up. You can't not practice. You can't not become something. The only choice you have is what you will become. And that choice is made one action at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time. There is no instant transformation. There is no sudden enlightenment. There is only the slow, invisible, unstoppable accumulation of repeated actions until you transform into something completely different from what you were when you started. Henry Ford transformed industry because he understood that small improvements compounded over time create results that seem impossible. He reduced the assembly time of a car from 12 hours to 1.5 hours. Not in a day, not with one great innovation, but with hundreds of small adjustments, each improving the process by a fraction of a second. And in the end, the impossible became routine. Your mind works the same way. Each small action compounded over weeks, months, years, creates a result that today seems impossible. The difference between who you are and who you want to be is not a giant leap. It's the sum of 1,000 small steps you take or fail to take every day. And here's the liberating part. You don't need to take 1,000 steps today. You only need to take one. and tomorrow, another, and the day after tomorrow, another. And if you do this long enough, you'll look back and not recognize the person you were. Because you are no longer that person. You are what you have built, action by action, day by day. Now, I need to tell you something that probably no one has ever told you. You're not going to succeed, at least not in the way you imagine. Because success isn't a destination. It's not a moment of arrival where you can finally relax and say, I did it. Success is a continuous state of action aligned with values. It's waking up every day and choosing to be who you decided to be. It's keeping your promises, especially when no one is watching. It's doing the work that needs to be done, even when no one will recognize it. It's finishing what you started because you said you would finish it, and your word, even if it's only to yourself, has value. That's the real test. Not the result you achieve, but the person you become in the process of achieving it. And here's the final truth. You already know what you need to do. You always knew. The problem was never a lack of information. It was a lack of execution. And execution isn't complicated. It's simple, brutally simple. You decide what matters. You identify the next action, and you do it. No drama, no ceremony, no waiting for the perfect moment. You simply do it, and then you do it again, and again, until it's no longer a decision, until it's who you are. The Stoics had a concept called amor fati, love of fate. It doesn't mean passively accepting what happens. It means loving the process, loving the struggle, loving the work, because work is where you forge yourself. It's where you become something greater than you were. Every obstacle is an opportunity to prove to yourself who you really are. Every difficulty is a chance to strengthen the muscle of discipline. Every moment you want to give up is exactly the moment where transformation happens. Because anyone can act when it's easy. Anyone can keep going when they're motivated. What separates you from everyone else is what you do when you're tired, demotivated, when everything inside you screams to stop. That's when you choose. That's when you decide who you're going to be. And nobody can make that choice for you. No book, no video, no coach, no system. In the end, it's just you and the action you are or are not taking. Here's what I want you to do now. Not tomorrow. Not after you finish watching this video. Now. Grab a piece of paper or open the Notes app on your phone. Write one thing down. One single thing you're going to do today that moves you in the direction of who you want to be. It can't be tomorrow. It can't be this week. It has to be today. And it has to be specific. Not, I'm going to start exercising. But, I'm going to do 10 push-ups. Not, I'm going to work on my project. But, I'm going to write 200 words. Not, I'm going to improve my life. But, I'm going to wake up at 6 in the morning. One action, small, clear, measurable, and then you're going to do it. Not because you want to, not because you're motivated, but because you decided. And your decision has weight, it has value, it has meaning. And after you do it, you're going to do it again tomorrow. And the next day. And the next day. Not forever. Just for 30 days. 30 days of consistent action. No exceptions. No negotiations. No bad days. If you can do this, if you can maintain an action for 30 days, something will change. Not in the results, not yet. But in you. In the way you see yourself. In the way you feel when you look in the mirror. Because you will know something that most people will never know. You are someone who keeps promises. You are someone who finishes what you start. You are someone who acts. And when you become that person, when you internalize that identity, the results become inevitable. Not because you're trying harder, but because you've changed. The person you were couldn't achieve the results you want, but the person you're becoming can and will. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, consistently, inexorably, like a well-oiled factory that produces quality every day, like an assembly line that never stops. like a system that works because it was designed to work. Your mind can be that factory, your life can be that system, but only if you choose to build it, and building happens one action at a time. If you've made it this far, I already know something important about you. You don't just want to survive your own mind, you want to master it. And that tells me you're exactly the kind of person who belongs in this community. This channel isn't about magical promises or instant transformations. It's about real people sharing real tools that work in the real world. Every week I bring a new perspective on how your mind works and, more importantly, how you can work with it, not against it. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel. Not.